Now, please give a warm welcome to the speakers for our kickoff View from the Top panel on the state of the music industry. Please welcome Anthony Bay, CEO, Rdio; Rio Caraeff, CEO of VEVO; Jordan Berliant, Partner and Head of Music Management, The Collective; Charles Caldas, CEO of Merlin; and a warm welcome for our moderator, Pham, Senior Correspondent at Billboard.
Thank you very much. We have a very distinguished panelists, set of panelists here with us today. Rio, Charles, Jordan, and Anthony. For those of you who don't know, Rio is head of VEVO, which today announced that they had 55 billion views last year, up 33%. That's music videos, both on YouTube and off YouTube. Charles represents more than 20,000 independent labels and does digital licensing on their behalf worldwide. Jordan is partner at The Collective and is an artist manager for Linkin Park, Stained, and a number of other very well-known bands. And Anthony Bay is CEO of Rdio, formerly worked at the three horsemen of the apocalypse, Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon, and now he's atoning for that by working for Rdio. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have a lot of insight these people are going to be able to share with us. I'll start off with a baseline. Many of you missed this great presentation we had yesterday. It was a fairly sparsely attended talk about the state of the music industry. So I'll just recap in 2 minutes, so you won't feel guilty about missing it. Will Page, the director of economics at Spotify, said that this year, 2013, well, this past year, 2013, revenues for the recorded industry, music industry, is likely to be 16.5 billion, and that's about flat over 2012. And he says flat is the new up. That's the recorded industry. There's a lot that isn't counted in that. David Bakula, head of research at Nielsen SoundScan, said that digital downloads, tracks and albums went down for the first time in history, but that streaming revenues is going up. Russ Krupnick of the NPD Group said that in a recent survey, 60% of those people who were surveyed were not willing to pay a monthly fee for music. So that was the good news. Actually, that wasn't. But the flip side of that is that 40% are willing to pay. And the other flip side to David Bakula's presentation is that streaming is going up. And with Will Page's presentation, the flip side of that is that recorded revenues, music revenues are just one part of many sources of income for the music industry. So we're here to discuss about some of the other aspects of the music industry, streaming, online videos, touring, and other sources of digital revenue. So I'm going to open up with a quick question each one of you will have to answer, which is, what do you think will become the industry's top source of revenue in the year 2017? Rio, we'll start with you.
Well, I try to think of a quick way to answer that, but I think it's a combination of advertising and subscriptions is probably the most succinct way I can describe it. At the end of the day, I believe that most people on the planet won't pay for subscriptions to recorded music, but that everybody loves music. Billions of people are engaged in music, and the time and attention of that audience is valuable. That brings you to advertising. On the subscription side, I think that music will be attached to every network and device that people pay for. So it'll be in your BMW lease payment, it'll be in your broadband access, it'll be associated and attached to things you already use and pay for. And you'll be paying for music without knowing you're paying for music. So the notion of a $10 a month subscription that hundreds of millions of people on the planet will pay for, I don't think is likely. but I think the likelihood of hundreds of millions of people paying, less than $1 per month to have access to music in everything they already use is the only way that the industry can scale and find growth in the future. And I think that getting paid a smaller amount of money from a much larger amount of people is the key to the future of subscriptions. That's my 2 cents.
Charles?
Yeah, look, I think diversity of consumption is going to be, a more diverse range of consumption opportunities, and monetizing those is the great opportunity out there.
You got to pick one.
I think it's consumption based, which is probably streaming. But I do think one thing that we don't discuss enough is that there's not a silver bullet here. There's not one form of consumption that's just going to change everything. Okay. The market's always operated on layers of value and all the way from low value consumers who spend nothing on music to high value consumers and the myriad of people in between that. I think the challenge is to create services that satisfy all of those consumers up and down the value chain and monetize each layer in a way that's compelling.
Jordan?
So if I answer this question from the perspective of artists, I think the top source of revenue will probably be lawsuits. Because at some point, artists are going to start wondering where the money is. And when they start asking their representatives where the money is, particularly the attorneys, some enterprising individuals are going to start looking into the kind of deals that their content representatives made on their behalf, and I think probably uncover some fairly interesting things. So my answer is lawsuits.
Got it. Anthony?
I don't know how you follow that. I don't know, but I don't think litigation would be my bet. Jordan raises a good point, is for who?
Right.
So if you look at this, from the artist's point of view, what is recorded music as a percentage of total revenues, and then what, does this count as recorded music? Do you count subscription as recorded music sales and things like that? So
let's not forget touring, which could be as much, if not
yeah,
more.
So if you count total revenue, there's probably more money in music hardware than there is in music consumption. I mean, how many people would have thought that the average price for headphones that people, in their teens and 20s would buy would be $250? So if you ask people 5 years ago, would you pay $250 for headphones? I think probably 90% would say no. So, I think it really depends and how all the pieces fit together. If I was going to pick paid revenues or the category of recorded, I'd probably be with Rio, which is a combination of subscription and advertising, because those two are very highly related. But as to how that passes all the way back to artists, the publishing side of it actually seems to be on a better track, in a sense, more than the recorded music, because in the ad world, publishers get paid as well. So I'd be in Rio's camp on that.
Yeah. I don't want to neglect downloads and files, but Mark Geiger at Medium declared that files are dead, and that we should just all forget files and start running to subscription streaming right away. Do you guys agree?
I think it's human nature to think in terms of binary absolutes.
Yeah.
Like, everybody will do this, or everybody will do that, and everything in between is dead. And I don't think that that's the truth on the planet. Right? I think that there are, if you want to listen to music in the tunnel, in Midtown Tunnel in New York, or on the airplane, streaming is not a great solution, even with offline caching. I do think that in a world of, we're moving, the concept of unlimited wireless streaming exists in almost no countries around the planet, and caps and meters and limits and are being imposed, which will retard streaming consumption on an unlimited basis. So I think that streaming and access is the future. For most people, it's the present, today, in a few countries. But there will be hybrid access and download and ownership models for a long time to come.
So, is file downloading dead? I don't think it's dead. I think it just smells funny. Too often we look through the filter of consumer behavior in terms of how it affects us in the industry. Yeah, paid downloads were down, but was downloading down? Well, if you throw in the actual #1 place for file downloading, which is probably BitTorrent,
Yeah.
I don't think it's down at all. I think it's
No,
way up.
It's way up.
So
Yeah.
the question really is monetization through file downloading dead? Yeah, it was down last year in terms of making money, but if we as an industry will follow where the consumer is and try to figure out a model to monetize their behavior, rather than doing what we always do, which is spend the last 10 years trying to change consumer behavior to fit our convenience, we might uncover ways to grow revenue through file downloading.
So speaking of consumer behavior, streaming as an option for consumers has been around since 2001 when Rhapsody came out with its service. And it's been a very long, hard slog for subscription music services. Why haven't these taken off? And do you think that this will be the year in which it does?
Well, I think what Jordan says is right. You know, these services have not been built for the consumer. Mm-hmm. They've been built to satisfy the rights owners. And I think that creates a dysfunctional world where consumers want a great consumer-friendly, cost-efficient, attractive way to construct music, and you now live in a market that's dominated by two behemoth companies in the space who are more focused on protecting their business model and protecting their revenues. So you have this misaligned set of incentives. On the one hand, we're sitting here saying we want to make it better and more open and have more consumption opportunities for consumers. On the other hand, you have companies for whom that world is not necessarily attractive, trying to protect all of the value that they lost in a very short-term way because they have short-term targets to meet. And I think that, that balance, and I think that, that relates to the lawsuit comment. And I mean, I think, it's a joke, but it's not a joke, because I do think that the digital licensing practices within, from a historical point of view, have been too focused on protectionism and extracting short-term value and extracting disproportionate value. And in our world, that's what we face on a day-to-day basis, is trying to, for the labels that we represent that are thriving in this digital space. And for independents, the digital market, the more digital the market gets, the better it is for the labels that we represent. And all of the measures that we see in our business show that the unbundling of the consumer is good for the kind of people who listen to our music. There is this dynamic of an industry trying to protect its historical advantages versus a world that demands a much more, aggressive and creative licensing regime.
So what's it going to take?
I think it's going to take a lot of services to fail, unfortunately, and for people to finally get to the point where, back to your comment on why, why it's taken so long to take off. It didn't take very long to take off in Sweden. It didn't take very long to take off in the Netherlands. But there's totally different market dynamics. In the Nordic countries, you didn't have a dominant download culture. So you went from the physical market to piracy to streaming. There was no download piece in the middle there. And I think there are cultural and regional sort of factors that affect those things.
Well, there was something else that was interesting about the way that Spotify operates in Scandinavian territories as opposed to the way streaming companies operate everywhere else. Does everybody know in Scandinavia the music revenues are at 1999 year 2000 levels? They're having a huge boom there. Why? Because of Spotify. But why is Spotify working there and not elsewhere? Because they market it differently. In Scandinavia, Spotify is bundled with your telephone service, with your data plan. You have to actually opt out of it. It's free for 3 months, and then you start paying. And something like 50% of people that have a data plan through their telcos are paid subscribers to Spotify, and it's working there. And we have the model. We know what works. Why we haven't been able to replicate that in other territories is beyond me. I think it's interesting what Beats is trying to do with the AT&T service that they've launched, but it's still not, it doesn't seem as robust as the plan that Spotify launched with in Scandinavia. We know it works.
Negotiating with phone companies is hard. So that's why it doesn't work.
It's also, if you think about it, it's the demographics of those markets. And as you said, there was no download market in the middle. But Spotify started out as a free service and evolved once people got a taste for the experience to be able to pay. And again, I don't know that they disclose the amount of time people use the free version before they upgrade. You know, some people here probably know that, but you know, the ability to try, back to your point about the comparison to piracy, the real question is how do you make the experience of legitimate consumption and use better than piracy? And you have to, you know, from an Amazon point of view, I think you have to start with the customer and work backwards, which is to some degree your point about the experience having to work. But it's also why CDs aren't going away. I mean, it's almost a silly question to say our downloads dead. For goodness sake, I mean, CDs are 40 to 50% of the business, and maybe not in LA, but on a global basis. And so there's no right answer. Different people like different things, and you know, this has to be a mix. The good news is it's a mix. This category didn't exist, and if this category didn't exist, you know, flat would not be the new.
One of the reasons why we're having difficulty monetizing streaming is because as an industry, we've done too good of a job teaching the consumer that it's free.
Right.
We have.
So what's the optimal price for streaming services? Some people say that what's holding it back in mass adoption is that $9.99 a month is too high.
But so what's the optimal price for television subscription?
I guess it depends what you want.
Hey, well, there you go. I mean, so there is no single standard price for television. You have packages, you have bundles, different people pay different amounts, but people are quite used to subscribing to television, and they're quite used to subscribing to entertainment, but it's not one size fits all.
But the pay TV market is not a global phenomena where billions of people pay
it's
for
600
television.
million.
Right. So there are stratas. There are people who pay $300. I pay $300 a month for Time Warner Cable, you know, in New York, and then there are hundreds of millions of people on the planet who don't pay for television. So the optimal price for music, I think, I agree with you that there are different packages and prices of value for different people.
Yep.
But I think if you want to think about billions of people on the planet accessing music legally, it has to feel free. It has to be like air conditioning. You know, you don't know what it costs. You miss it when it's not there. You feel like you need it. You know, it becomes built into the basic experience of enjoying life. And I think that that's built into your business. It's built into your residence. It's built into your car. It's built into your phone. It's built into your television. And I think at that point, you know, hundreds of millions of people are paying for voicemail. They don't know what they're paying for voicemail, but a company in Israel is getting 90 cents a month per sub for Verizon, you know, to offer a voicemail service. I think that the music as an entertainment utility has a price when bundled into networks and devices, and that price gets lowered as you get more subscribers. And so the wholesale price of unlimited music has to come down substantially in order to attach music with lots of devices. And an only way to drive that price down is to guarantee significant volume. And even then, it's not the same as driving the cost of a battery in a phone down from $3 to $1. You know, it's a different ecosystem of rights owners. But I think that there are people who will pay more than $9.99 a month for amazing music services, and then there are lots of people who will pay nothing, but the devices they buy, the networks they use, will compensate rights owners for the music that they consume.
Mark Geiger said something that I thought was pretty insightful, and that is the price you start out in the beginning when a new service is introduced is not necessarily going to be the price that you're going to end up with over time. Over time, subscription services for things like telephone and cable TV tend to go up over the decades. So you may start out low, but the prices, if you think about your cable bill over the past 10, 15 years, it's just starting to creep up. And his point is that the same could hold true for music subscription services as well. I wanted to ask you, Jordan, about, again, the benefits of artists, aside from lawsuits. Are we, you know, for one of the things that, one of the conversations that really came out last year was the conversation between Moby and Tom York about the benefits of streaming to the artists. Do you think that's going to continue this year, or and is that sort of conversation beneficial to have?
I think the conversation that's actually beneficial to have is to figure out what it takes in order to effectively monetize streaming. You know, I was at Linkin Park's label yesterday, and I asked them, how many salespeople does your corporation have? Well over 100. I said, over 100? There's only really 3 or 4 places you can actually sell music anymore, and you have over 100 people. How many of them sell advertising? None? Really? Well, isn't that where the consumer is? What do you mean? Well, if the consumer is streaming music, and the most effective way to monetize the music is through advertising, why isn't your sales staff oriented to sell advertising? Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about it. Well, it's time to do something about it. Again, we're the most arrogant people in the entire entertainment world because we don't pay attention to consumer behavior. And if we just did, if we spend 10% of our time thinking about how the consumer is behaving, we could figure it out.
I think, Alex, just on that point as well, I mean, I think the debate there also gets mixed up because a lot of that, what was being talked about last year, is actually issues between artists and record companies, not between streaming services and artists. You know, people forget that there are some middlemen in here that, you know, where a lot of that dysfunction actually happens.
Yeah, blaming the delivery system that the consumer wants is sort of like blaming the consumer. You don't get anywhere when you blame the consumer. Look to your partner. Look to the person that's supposed to distribute and promote and market and monetize your content, and ask them what they're doing to accomplish those things.
Got it.
Therein lies the answer.
I get asked all the time how much, if an artist is streaming 1 billion views or 100 million views or 1 million video views, how much money is my artist getting? And that's a very hard question for me to answer because I have no idea what it says in the contract that the artist signed with the label that distributes their music. I'm not a party to that contract. I don't read that contract. I don't know what it says. I don't know what advance they received. I don't know if they're recouped. I don't know what their royalty rate is. I don't know what it says about streams. I don't know any of these things. It's not my business, right? If an artist wants to license their videos to me directly, I'm happy to pay them directly. If a label wants to license me their videos directly, I'm happy to do that as well. But I know exactly what I pay to everybody who licenses us music videos. I don't know exactly what happens afterwards, right? So that's, you know, it's in our best interest, you know, to flow the music and the revenue down to everybody who creates it. But I think artists also have to take responsibility for the contracts they sign and the monies they receive. And if there are disputes, that's between them and the people they sign the contract with.
So they should hire Jordan to do that for them because it sounds like he does a good job.
Yeah, you always get up to this black box, and that black box is the contract that they sign with the labels.
Yeah, they sign it willingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So advertising, how big is that opportunity? Maybe this is something that you think of. This drives your business, Rio.
Yeah, we decided that people don't want to own music videos, and people don't want to own, that ownership is a liability, access is really where we need to be. So in 2009, we said we're going to walk away from the sell-through market and are going to go all in on figuring out how to make the audience that loves music as valuable as the audience that loves the Super Bowl, the World Cup, you know, the premiere of a new show on Fox. You know, we believe that music audiences are tremendously valuable, that they're very passionate, they're very engaged, they're addressable at a significant scale, that the quality of the programming is great. The industry spends over $300 million a year making these videos. And so we believe that all of the components are there to make this audience as valuable as the audience of who loves professional sports. but we didn't see that reflected in the economics, right? So pre-VEVO, the effective CPM for music video audiences in the US was less than $3, less than $1 outside of the US. And now we're consistently selling that audience at a tremendous scale, well into the $25, $30 range in over a dozen countries. So we have hundreds of ad salespeople at VEVO. We work with exclusive ad partners around the world to sell a VEVO audience. We don't sell YouTube. We don't sell VEVO. We sell people who love music on every screen in every country in an atomized and fragmented world, from Apple TV to Xbox, from Roku to Chromecast, from YouTube to iPhone to Android to Windows Phone, to syndication into other people's apps. And we put VEVO videos everywhere because we think that that's the way the physics of the web work, and we think that's in the best interest of the consumer. And so we're very bullish on advertising, and we have been able to generate hundreds of millions of dollars and pay out hundreds of millions of dollars to artists and songwriters and rights owners just in the last 3 years.
Do you think there will come a point where people will be willing to pay for music videos?
We do, but we have to be a little cautious about it because in the entire history of music videos, from 1978 onward, people have never had to really pay for them directly. And so you have to be careful about making the assumptions that lots of people will. Right? You can't just say hundreds of millions of people will pay for access to music videos. That's not a sure thing. The question is, what will people pay for? There's 1 million people in America who will pay for anything. Right? That doesn't mean there's 10 million people who will pay for anything. It doesn't mean there's 100 million people who will pay for anything. The amount of, so we can build, yes, a nice little subscription business, but that's not a, to spend a lot of time and money to get, 1 to 3 million subs is not really worth it. And so the question is, what will people pay for? How do you deliver value? What's the right price point? What's the conversion funnel? How do you drive the marketing and the distribution? And how do you differentiate it from free? And so we're taking a careful and cautious approach to it. I think at the end of the day, we would love to have a dual revenue stream business. And I think that there is a subscription model in our future, but it is something we're being careful about because it's not something you can just assume that lots of people will pay for.
I mean, Google tried it, though. I mean, Google tried to launch subscription last year. And they tried with some pretty big brands, Sesame Street. Didn't work. So I don't have any confidence at all that, that a video subscription service is a viable business.
Music videos.
Yes.
And back to the advertising and brand sponsorships, there's a lot of money to be had there, but there's obviously a conflict with some artists who don't feel that that's the right way, the right path for them artistically, philosophically. I guess Bob Dylan got a lot of flack for his Chrysler Super Bowl commercial for as being some people call him a sellout, but is that a hurdle for the growth of advertising and sponsorships within music? Is there, are there sensitivities that we need to think about, or is that just, a red herring?
I don't think it's a black and white issue. If you look back at the history of music video, when MTV, at least in the US, used to play music videos, there was always a brand association with music videos. It just came in the form of advertising before or after a video. And there's, I think, different levels of association with brands. And yes, I think artists, obviously have a sensitivity to those associations, but the form of the association, I think, is what needs to be examined here. If it's a pre-roll spot before a video, that's one level of association. If it's a brand integration in the actual content, that's another level of association. And so I think the consumer is pretty used to hitting the skip button after 5 seconds of seeing a spot before a music video, and I think that they don't necessarily associate what they're seeing or missing with the actual content that they're searching for. But placing a song in a TV campaign for a brand I guess there is some level of implicit endorsement, you know, in that exercise, and you know, an artist appearing in a spot for you know, for a brand is another level of even higher integration. And so I think it's a case-by-case thing, and artists have to look at what their comfort level is.
I think it's going to get a lot more nuanced. You know, I think brands will increasingly be integrated into the programming itself, into the videos, and then those brands will become dynamically placed into the videos. So the Toyota in this music video can turn into a Nissan a year later. The phone that's used can be updated to the latest model or a different model in a different country. The soft drink can change. You know, so dynamic product placement creates all kinds of artist and brand and consumer considerations to think through. So we think that that's the future of how brands are integrated into the programming.
It's also the past. I mean, radio has been the primary way people listen to music for a very long time. Radio is completely ad-supported, and that model, again, there may be issues with it, but it's what people are used to. And you know, you don't get to say whose ad comes on before your song, and that's a global. You know, so frankly, the number one way people listen to music still is not on phones. You know, it's on radio. And you know, one of the questions here is back to start with the customer, is how do you show up for people in a way that's as easy for the average person, you know, as what they're used to, which is radio. You know, Sirius has done a brilliant job at that in cars. You know, and by the way, you know, 26 million people pay quite a bit of money in this country for, you know, radio subscription. So it's not that people wouldn't pay. It just has to work.
Right. And the integration seems to be getting deeper and deeper. You know, you're not just ads before, during, and after your performance or your videos, but product placements within the video itself. You know, the requirements that the artist recommend the product, tweet about the product. So it's getting to be deeper and deeper levels of integration.
That's why they need people like Jordan to help them manage.
I'm sorry?
That's why they need...
Say it louder. Say it louder.
That's why they need people like Jordan to help manage. But you know, you're right. It's a very sophisticated process of, you know, an ad on the service that you have no control over, all the way back to how deeply engaged. And if we're going to make this work, you have to have a very rich experience. I mean, you've done a great job at proving that you can better monetize.
But the challenge there is there's an inverse correlation between what's scalable and what's custom. So right now, going to every artist and every manager and talking to them about, you know, the brand that's going to be in the video and how it may change to a different brand, you know, it retards the sales and revenue process. Right? You can't arm your sales team with that opportunity to go out and sell it in dozens of countries across thousands of videos if you have to go and get the label's consent and the artist's consent and the songwriter's consent every time you want to change the brand in the video. It's just, there's easier ways to make a buck. We're not even going to do it. If it doesn't,
what you can
from the artist's point of view, you can.
So yeah, figuring out how to scale it is going to be key to growing revenue.
Well, if you look at how videos are organized, if you look at it, it's each artist having a channel.
Right.
It could be a sponsor for that channel.
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, and that's something that that VEVO and an artist representative, you know, should be working on together.
Yeah, and I think my point was that for sales teams, there are lots of different things to sell. And if you have to identify the points of friction and cut through them, otherwise revenue is not going to scale. So that's what I've learned building a sales organization and having hundreds of salespeople to manage, is how do you incentivize them to make money, and how do you scale it to grow to billions, you know, hundreds of millions and billions of revenue. And things that are custom don't scale and are not worth doing.
They don't scale for your sales force, but if you're the artist,
yeah,
and the artist
I'm
says,
just talking
look,
about from my perspective. From my perspective, it doesn't
so
scale.
you can't be going back and trying to do product placement, but the artist could certainly say, you know, I'm going to use this product, and it's going to be in my videos, and that's just the video. By the time it gets to you, it has that. So from the artist's point of view, you know, there's an opportunity to figure out how to monetize free in a way that they haven't, you know, necessarily had to before. So that, and they're not mutually inconsistent. You know, as Jordan said, you can have an artist channel, and then, you know, you could sponsor the artist channel, and so there's, you know, you have to find some combination. Your sales force can't do that.
So one last question before we go to the audience for questions. I'd like to ask each one of you what you think is the most promising emerging platform for music for 2014, 2015.
VEVO.
What do you... It's already emerged. VEVO's already here. And Rdio's already here. So what's emerging, not established, but emerging platform for music that seems most promising? I won't hold you to it. Rio?
Emerging, meaning didn't exist a year ago? Or what do you mean?
It's not mainstream. Most people haven't heard of it.
Right.
You know, is it going to be the drum pants? Is it going to be the shower, the speaker in the shower head? Is it going to be, maybe telematics. We'll agree that telematics isn't quite mainstream yet.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think probably Jawbone. I would say, and with the Jambox products and with the Up Band, I think they have a lot of potential to use music to learn more about your health, your body, your well-being, your lifestyle. So I think there's a lot of, it's very early days, but I'm very bullish on that company and the potential to use their services and products to discover music and enjoy music in my life.
Charles, what's your vote for emerging platform and what will define success there?
Okay, well, sitting next to Jordan, I'm not going to do any product endorsements until someone buys some advertising on this segment. So,
brought to you by Quaker Oats.
I'm going to take a broader view of this, and I think that the challenge is still, or the opportunity is still, I think, broadening the access points. So I think, whatever's going to make the difference in the living room or in the car seem to me like the two major areas of where we need to be focusing. Because, then it's more akin to your Sirius XM experience or to your cable satellite experience.
Jordan?
I want to give you a couple. One is Microsoft Spark, which was initially developed for gaming, but I think has a very vibrant music application.
Can you explain to us what Spark is?
Well, you can. I was going to say you could Google it, but I meant you could Bing it and find out. It's actually an interactive technology that some very, very, very smart people at Microsoft created that allows gamers to change the game that they're playing, both visually and from a gameplay standpoint. There's also an application for music. So they create a toolbox, and paint boxes, on computers used to be pixels and brushes and colors, and now with Spark, the tool is actually objects in motion and game mission. And so the opportunity to gamify a music video or to change a music video, I think is going to be pretty revolutionary.
Interactive?
Yes. I mean, too many times interactive technologies for music have been a solution in search of a problem. It's sort of like restless leg syndrome. Like, nobody knew that it existed until there was a cure for it.
And a name.
And then everybody had it. Or like those little yellow guys that live under my toenails. But this one is actually, I think, is really fun and exciting, and I think that's something to keep an eye out for. Two other quick ones. One is the thing that Beats has done very, very well, whether they did it intentionally or it just became this, is the idea of turning a music device into a fashion piece. So I think looking at other forms of wearable speakers, I think, is something that that could be a trend this year.
Have you checked out the drum pants?
The drum pants, yeah.
Drum pants?
Drum pants,
and then,
actual product.
And then finally, I'll put a plug in for a service that I use called Music Aficionado, which is musician-curated content. One of the things that we don't often focus on in the music industry is that biggest consumers of music a large portion of them happen to themselves be musicians. I'm not saying that they're musicians that play out, but people that play guitar or sing or play piano in their homes, people that are interested in playing music. And Music Aficionado lets them follow both their friends and artists that they enjoy in a sort of a deeper way of looking at the content that they're consuming that is music-based, Music Aficionado.
Anthony?
I would pick up on something Charles said, and I would call it sort of music everywhere. The shift to smartphones being where you control music and Bluetooth being where you play it back. I mean, if you just go back a couple of years and look at the difference between what's available now, if you at CES, probably 70% of the electronics were Bluetooth enabled, including cars, including sound bars at home. So all of a sudden, your smartphone can be your entertainment system with Bluetooth. And then the next version of that is integration into cars and home audio. Tesla announced they're bundling Rdio in all the cars in Europe. And for safety's sake, Bluetooth in cars isn't good enough because you're messing with your phone and your eyes are not on the road. And still, cars are where a huge part of music consumption. That's the dominant place for radio. So I would say that the ability to integrate music and a variation of what you were talking about how music becomes part of every sort of thing you buy. I think it becomes part of everything you have or in your environment. And so those are the big ones.
Yeah, in the Internet of Things, music tends to become one of the first media to penetrate new technologies because it's very lightweight files. You're not consuming a large amount of bandwidth and processing power. So it tends to be sort of like the leading indicator.
And it's remarkable.
It's also the only thing you can experience actively or passively.
Yeah.
Right? Unlike a movie or a TV show or a book, it's hard to, music, you can lean forward or lean back.
Yeah, you can enjoy it while doing other things or not.
Yep.
So we have a few minutes left for questions, and I want to see if there's over there.
All right, I'll try and speak up. We have some great streaming technologies out there. You're definitely one of them. VEVO, another one. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're pretty damn good. They offer a lot of content for a great value. What does the panelist think about what features, product sets, or initiatives that they still have to do to make them compelling to consumers?
I think just a quick thing on that is, and I don't think we think about this enough, is we're at the very early point of an actual format shift. Going from the CD to the download conceptually was much easier than explaining to a consumer of going from downloading a file and putting on a drive to having access and being able to have things offline and online and how that plays into your system. It's very difficult to do an elevator pitch for a streaming subscription service. And I think part of it is more people, and this is touching on what Jordan said about the Scandinavian experience, is if you give people an opportunity to touch, feel and play and live with a product, they'll become addicted to it and they'll want it more. So I think the challenge right now is, I think those services are all fantastic and they're all competing with each other on functionality. The challenge is there's not enough people are actually experiencing what it feels like, and I think that's the first step.
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think when you search on something, what you get back is often way too broad. And so kind of refining the search features and creating a few more filters so that you can get to what you're looking for a little more quickly. I should say, disclose, I'm actually a paid subscriber of Rdio. I really, really, really like it. But one other thing that I think would help is having Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin on Rdio would be a good thing.
You don't manage them though, do you?
I know.
Maybe they should.
In a world of unlimited choice, people become paralyzed with indecision, and so discovery, is key. So just because you can stream everything doesn't mean you know what to stream.
Right.
And figuring out what, I think Beats is trying to brand it, what to play next is more important than what you're playing now. And that is key. You know, it's the key to usage, it's the key to engagement, it's the key to retention, it's the key to acquisition, it's the key to reducing churn. It's the key. It's not about what services people use, it's what service, or what's on your device. It's what you use and value, you know. So it's, I think, discovery and finding out what to hear and what to watch at a particular moment in time in your life is really important. And that's something we're at the still very early days of solving.
I would also add that context might be something that will be increasingly important, increasingly intelligent and smarter about delivering the kinds of music that, you know, is suitable to what you're doing now. So some people think, you know, in this age of data, context will be the king. Will, you had a question.
Yeah, I just have another question related to Spotify, which is totally objectively. One country which fascinates me when I'm looking at is happening last year in Denmark. And Spotify was by no means the first streaming service in Denmark, BBC was there first, but great. You've got a situation in Denmark now where every single telco has game and music. So every single telco is hard bundling music services and promoting them to the point which is you can't be a telco in Denmark without having a music service. And that for me, regardless of who you work for or what your favorite service is, that's a beautiful end game where all these, you've given up on being dumb pipes and you're polluting copyright and now you're a wise pipe monetizing it. I just want to throw to the panel, how long before we get there in North America where every single telco has game and working with a music service?
That's the point I made earlier. We know what works.
But let's
Why
play,
we aren't doing it
it's
is
also,
beyond.
you stop and you say, is linking a single service to a single telco also the right way to do this? Because then you end up, if you do that in television, you know, if you move from a cable to satellite, or you don't end up losing programming. And so the challenge in that model is you line people up where this service is with that carrier. And so I think, you know, you're right in the sense it gets breadth, but there might in a perfect consumer-driven world, I'd want to choose. I'd want to be able to say, yes, I want music, and music is part of it, and let me pick in the same way I can pick.
Yeah, if you play, it's not good for the industry to have, if you're a Verizon customer, this is the only music service you can use. And if you're an AT&T customer, this is the only music service you can use. What if your friends and family are on different services? And that non-homogeneous worldview, I think, is not healthy to the overall consumer. And then if you play it out to its logical conclusion, like in Denmark, where every carrier has music services, all of those music services have the same content, then every music service is an undifferentiated commodity. And then that is not good either, right? So then it kind of brings you back to what carriers are looking for and what services are looking for is differentiation. And how do you have something, whether it's content, features, distribution, marketing, that nobody else has to stand out from the crowd. And so the quickest way to devalue music is to turn it into an undifferentiated commodity and devalue the audience that loves music as well. So differentiation, I think, is key when you play out the logical conclusion of broad-based distribution.
The only thing I'd add to that, though, is from a rights holder perspective, you know, we spend a lot of time analyzing territory by territory, tier by tier, how these things work. Where there's a territory, you know, like the Netherlands or France with Deezer or Telia in Sweden with Spotify, the economic measures all of a sudden make a hell of a lot more sense if you get to that scale. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I was going to say about those markets is they have much more competitive mobile phone spaces than a market like America does. Right. You know, if you're competing in a market with lots of churn and where customer acquisition and retention costs are really high, then the cost of bundling a music service probably in context doesn't seem so much of a drain as it would in a market with only 2 or 3 dominant telcos. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us and sharing with us your thoughts. We appreciate it.
Thank you to the State of the Music Industry panelists.